Our guest today is the Secretary of the Illinois Department of Transportation. She was appointed by Governor Pat Quinn a little over 2 years ago. Our guest today oversees a workforce of over 5,300 employees with oversight of billions of dollars in capital projects. She is a published author, speaker, and instructor at the University of Illinois at Springfield. Our guest today earned her Bachelor of Arts degree from Augustana College in Rock Island. She earned her master's degree in public administration from the University of Illinois at Springfield. Ladies and gentlemen, Ann Schneider. Ann?
Okay, so for those of you that didn't get this, the person to call if you can't get a hold of Governor Sean O'Shea, I've got his phone number. See me after we're done. Sorry, Sean. I would never do that to you. Good afternoon. It's interesting to hear Jay describe me as distinguished. I've been called a lot of things, rarely distinguished, but that's clearly an honor for me, and thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. So last night, I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, and I was sitting on the sofa with my husband and my 2 dogs, and so I thought, well, I got to try some of this out. So I started talking about what I wanted to talk about today, and I got through about 10 minutes, and I looked over, and my husband was sound asleep. So I want to apologize to you in advance if I put you all to sleep like I did him. I just ask that you don't snore like he and the 2 dogs, because then I won't hear myself think. Anyway, I am excited to be here and talking to you today about some of the great things that have happened in transportation and some of the great things that we continue to work on. And before I delve into that, I also wanted to recognize the people that work for IDOT, the people that at the Illinois Department of Transportation are the professionals that are really getting the job done day in and day out. I get to run around and talk about it and talk about the great things that are happening, but they're the ones on the ground making it happen. And I couldn't do the job that I do if I didn't have such a great team to rely upon. And so I just ask that you recognize, there are a few of them here today, I would just ask that you recognize their efforts with a round of applause. And I also noticed a couple of former IDOT employees here today. They were groundbreakers when they were with the department. Both of them were women that took leadership roles in the organization before I got the opportunity to take on this role. And so I really look to them as groundbreakers and the ones that helped to make things happen at IDOT for so long. And that's Diane O'Keefe, who was our Region 1 engineer, and Mary Lamy, who was our Region 5 engineer from another part of the state. But in the end, I wouldn't have the opportunity to see all of these exciting things that are going on happen had it not been for the fact that I am so fortunate to be working for Governor Pat Quinn. And I bring that up because I have met and worked for a lot of different people, but I have not had the opportunity to work for someone who is so passionate and so committed to making things better for the people of this state. And because of that commitment and that passion, he is someone who understands the importance of making investments in our transportation infrastructure. And he also understands that the return on those investments is job creation and economic development, which keeps Illinois competitive in the global marketplace. And that's really important. I'm fortunate enough to be the chairperson of the National Freight Advisory Committee. That is a function of the U.S. Department of Transportation. And in that role, I have seen the importance of transportation infrastructure when we talk about freight movement, which is undergirding all of the economic activity in this country and helping the entire nation to be economically competitive. And so the fact that he gets that and understands that and is committed to it really makes a difference. So back in 2009, when the governor first took office, and he always likes to talk about this when he's out doing groundbreakings with me, he recognized that we needed to do something. We were in the throes of a great recession. A lot of people across the country were retreating. A lot of state governments were saying, whoa, you know, we can't afford to make investments. He worked hard during that legislative session, his first, to really make it known that we needed to make important investments in our infrastructure at that point in time, not only to create the immediate jobs, which were so sorely needed at that point in time, but also to create that economic opportunity that we could build on and grow with as we emerged out of that recession. And because of his efforts, he helped to pass the Illinois Jobs Now, well, he actually passed the Illinois Jobs Now capital program in working with the leaders of the General Assembly. And because of that, we have been able to invest over $20 billion in our transportation infrastructure in just 5 years. If you add in the money from the federal stimulus package, we are spending over $22 billion here in Illinois on our transportation infrastructure, which has really made the difference. And I know a lot of you out there are in the industry, and I know that you have been able to participate with us and have acted as partners with us in making those investments and making sure that what we do is right for Illinois and is really supporting our economy and making the very necessary infrastructure improvements that are needed to keep us moving. Governor Quinn provided that strong leadership, and with that, we've been able to make these investments. So to date, we have invested $14.6 billion in our highways and bridges. So what that equates to is 7,500 miles of roads that we have improved and 1,300 bridges to date in just that 5-year period. That's a huge amount of activity that's been going on out there, and we're very excited about what lies ahead. We're looking at creative ways to keep that momentum moving. We've also invested another $2.9 billion in our transit and rail systems here in Illinois. And I'm glad that John Gates is here because we've done a lot of things in partnership with the transit agencies up here in the Chicagoland area, but also downstate, to really make those crucial investments in what we think is such an important part of our transportation system, and that's transit. We've also, as part of that, made investments in high-speed rail, and that has really started to pay dividends for us. We've seen our ridership increase and more than double on our Chicago to St. Louis corridor over the last few years, and as we bring additional equipment and additional service capacity online, I can only see that growth growing more and more and more all the time. We've also spent $200 million in the state's airports, and that's outside of what happens at O'Hare and Midway. That's $200 million. And last year when I was here, I talked about the size of our system, and we have a lot of airports in the state of Illinois. I think there's over 900 landing facilities. And so those investments are crucial to those areas of the state that rely on that air service. Sometimes it's to keep corporate partners involved in an area, for instance, the airport at maybe Decatur or the Quad Cities and Peoria, where there is some large corporate entities that need that corporate air service. And so those airport investments are helping us to keep business here in Illinois. Or it could be even a smaller landing strip somewhere downstate where it's necessary to bring in supplies for farming or other types of rural activities that are going on out there. So those investments are crucial to the state of Illinois and to the people of Illinois. All of that spending has resulted in a number of major accomplishments, and I just want to focus in on what we were able to accomplish in 2013. And these are only examples of the projects that we have brought to fruition in 2013. So I'm going to try to read through these a little bit. We invested money in the CTA Dan Ryan Red Line reconstruction. CTA took the lead on that project. The state of Illinois, through the governor's Illinois Jobs Now program, provided the funding for that Red Line reconstruction. And I have to tell you, we were meeting with Forrest and Chris Bushell at CTA, and we were talking about this project, and they came in and they talked about the fact that they were going to do this in 5 months, and I thought, you guys are crazy. But you know what? they got it done. They made it work in partnership with our agency, with Metra and PACE, who provided some reliever service to help that project move forward without too many headaches for the people that rely on that service. And then also our agency worked very hard with the Illinois State Police on lane closures on the Dan Ryan. That's a very interesting dance to do out there, because you know that that's a major thoroughfare here in Chicago. It's right outside of not one of my favorite ball team stadiums, the White Sox Park, but U.S. Cellular. So that creates some issues, but because of the commitment and the cooperation of all of those agencies, that project got done on time, on budget, and now the people on the south side are really getting to benefit from that improvement to that red line. We also opened Reconstruct at Wacker Drive. Again, another partnership with another transportation agency. The Department of Transportation worked closely with the Chicago Department of Transportation, who I don't think Rebecca's here, but I want to congratulate and give a shout out to Rebecca Scheinfeld for now being the new commissioner there. But so we work closely with CDOT on the Wacker Drive project, and if you haven't driven it, you should. It's beautiful. I take Lower Wacker a lot when I'm headed back out to Midway, and it's nice to have that escape route. We also opened grade separations at Belmont in Downers Grove and at 71st in Bridgeview, and that's near Toyota Park where the Chicago Fire play. And what we've done with those grade separations, we're reducing congestion and we're making our streets safer. When I was at the the ribbon cutting for the one in Downers Grove at Belmont, there was an elementary school just a block and a half down the road from where this grade separation went in, and it definitely made that town and that street safer for the kids that were going to and from that elementary school. And that's the fun part about working for transportation. That's the exciting part about working for transportation. It's making those improvements that are going to make a difference in people's lives. We also work very closely with the Tollway, and we continue to support their efforts on the $3 billion Elgin O'Hare Western Access, which had an historic groundbreaking late last year. We continue to work also with them on the I-57, I-294 interchange project, and that's to address one of only two areas in the country, and I know this is something else that the governor likes to talk about, one of only two areas in the country where two interstates intersect but don't connect. Well, we're solving that problem now, and I think we're a long ways down that road and almost getting ready to open part of those movements. We're also working with the Tollway on their Blue Ribbon Advisory Council on the Route 53 extension into Lake County. We think that's an important project, and we want to be as supportive as we can with the Tollway to make sure that we do that and that we do it thoughtfully, that we respect the environment when we do that project, and that the project gets done and delivers that much needed relief for travelers going in and out of Lake County. In Algonquin, we have made significant progress on the bypass that will improve traffic flows in and around that area. And in the fall, we began the reconstruction of the Circle Interchange by breaking ground on the Morgan Street Bridge. That is a hallmark project for the Illinois Department of Transportation. And when that project is complete, the Circle Interchange project will not only add capacity to the interchange and provide for improved and safer traffic flows on the Dan Ryan, the Kennedy, the Eisenhower, and Congress, it will also provide needed congestion mitigation at the most congested interchange in the United States of America. Also, I want to point out, as part of that project, we are making access to transit better by improving the CTA Blue Line stations along there. And we are providing for bicycle and pedestrian accommodations that will be upgraded and make it safer for those types of transportation users. So we want to take care of our bicyclists and our pedestrians as well. IDOT is working hard to expand transit services and ridership. And again, John, hats off to PACE. We've been partnering with PACE to provide bus-on-shoulder service on the Stevenson. And we are now working on expanding that very successful program. They've seen their ridership increase 300% along the corridor, and I think it provides some very exciting opportunities for the Chicagoland area and how we can use transit and leverage our existing transportation system to provide some much needed congestion relief. So stay tuned in 2014, because I think we'll probably be making some announcements regarding Bus on Shoulder. We've also made significant progress in the CREATE program by not only completing the grade separations I mentioned earlier, but we also broke ground on 2 other grade separations, one in Bensonville at Irving Park Road and one at Roosevelt and Kotz Road in West Chicago. Improvements to rail infrastructure as part of the CREATE program that we have completed today have resulted in a 30% improvement in freight movement times through the Chicagoland area. That is a huge benefit. And I have to tell you, it's interesting, again, going back to that National Freight Advisory Committee thing. We learned that it takes a train, and you probably have all heard this, it takes a train about 48 hours to get from the Port of Long Beach or the Port of LA to Chicago. To get from one side of Chicago to the other, it takes 33 hours. It used to be it took almost that 48 hours. So we are seeing some improvements, but obviously we still have a ways to go with that. So we are going to be looking at ways that we can be, excuse the expression, creative in creating additional opportunities in the CREATE program for investments to make things even better. In 2013, we continued to make progress on intercity passenger rail improvements and expansions, including the recent award of the contract for a multi-state locomotive procurement led by Illinois and funded by the FRA. That was an exciting moment in time for us. We were chosen to lead that procurement. It was for the states of California, Washington, Illinois, Michigan, and Missouri. We led that procurement, and we successfully chose a winning vendor. And so those locomotives will now be built and will become part of our intercity passenger rail system here in Illinois and across the nation. We also are making progress continually on the 110 mile per hour service on the Chicago to St. Louis corridor. And I have to say that we have established a 110 mile per hour service on part of the Chicago to St. Louis corridor and an even bigger part of the Chicago to Detroit corridor, working with our sister states. So we are making progress on high-speed rail here in the Midwest, and I'm excited about the improvements that we are making that will continue to help us expand that network. We are adding sidings in 2014, and we are going to do some double tracking along the St. Louis-Chicago corridor. And we're also working on positive train control with the Union Pacific, Amtrak, GE, and Wabtec, who are all the contractors that are working on that project together, so that we can deliver high-speed rail to Illinois on that Chicago to St. Louis corridor sometime in 2016. We're committed to that. We're going to deliver that. And this spring, we're going to break ground on projects along the Chicago to Quad Cities corridor and the Chicago to Rockford route as we work to reestablish those connections that have been dormant for over 30 years. And I'm originally from the Quad Cities, and it was a big railroad community for a long time with the Rock Island Lines. When the Rock Island Lines went bankrupt, some of that fell off, and I think the people in that area are very excited about having that connection to Chicago, with Chicago being the hub of the Midwest passenger rail system, as it is with the air passenger system, as it is with freight. You know, it's so important that we make investments that reinforce the fact that we have one of the strongest transportation systems in the country. In the spring of 2013, we worked with Caltrans on a procurement for rail cars for the high-speed rail project in the Midwest and California. Same states I mentioned before in the locomotives, only Washington was not involved in the rail car procurement. Those rail cars are being produced right here in Illinois, in Rochelle, because of investments that were made there to attract Nippon Sharyo to that facility. And the Metra rail cars, or the Metra Electric District rail cars, are also being built at that facility. And that has led to the creation of 250 brand new jobs, brand new manufacturing jobs, right here in the central part of Illinois. And it couldn't have happened without all of these investments that we're making through the Illinois Jobs Now Capital Program. Also, in 2013, we got a crucial path forward for the South Suburban Airport. And that was established through legislation that gave IDOT the authority to be the project sponsor. And we are making progress on multiple fronts related to that project. At the end of last year, we closed on some key parcels of land for the inaugural footprint of that airport. Some of the land that we purchased at the end of last year is actually within the footprint of where the terminal facility will be. We now have almost 53% of the land needed for the inaugural footprint acquired. We have completed all of the chapters of the airport master plan, which is required before we can move forward. We are working closely with the FAA on finalizing a number of those chapters, and they've approved over half of the chapters that are have been submitted to them. And we are also working closely with the FAA on the environmental impact statement that is necessary before we can move that project along. We have started a P3 feasibility study to look at the best way to build that airport and to minimize or eliminate the exposure of public funds on that project. And the FAA has begun the crucial airspace study that is needed to move that project forward in the EIS process. We have also passed some key milestones for the Ileana project and have the state's first public-private partnership procurement well underway. And if you didn't see, last week we announced the shortlisted teams. There were 4 teams that are moving forward in the process. We're working with them now on a draft request for proposal. After we get a Tier 2 record of decision, then we will move forward with the final request for proposal, and we are looking for a commercial close sometime late in the year. And I have to tell you, if you have not been to Will County lately, you should really make the trip, because I was out there a couple weeks ago at the intermodal facilities, and we toured the BNSF intermodal facility, which is the smaller of the two. And the amount of activity that's taking place at those intermodals is mind-boggling, and the amount of trucks that is generating. But it's not just the intermodal facilities for the BNSF and the Union Pacific. It's also all of the warehousing that has evolved around those intermodal facilities. And that's creating job opportunities in an area of the state that has not had job opportunities since we saw some manufacturing decline in the 80s. So we're bringing opportunities to an underserved area, and I think the transportation infrastructure is really undergirding all of that growth. And it will demonstrate, if you do make that trip, it'll demonstrate to you why there is bipartisan, bi-state support for this crucial freight corridor. And our accomplishments and efforts go beyond just the infrastructure work that we're doing. As a result of the tireless efforts of State Senator Maddie Hunter, I want to give her a shout out, along with Representative Will Davis, a groundbreaking DBE revolving loan program was passed by the Illinois General Assembly that IDOT is responsible for, and because of that program, we're going to increase capacity and participation by minority and female-owned contractors. We have a lot of work to do in that area. I will say, on the consulting side, in 2013, the Department of Transportation had 35% DBE participation on average in our 4 professional transportation bulletins. And I know there's a lot of engineering firms out there today. That is so important to us, because we really think it's crucial for our DBE partners to build capacity and participate in the work that we're doing to make sure that the state is successful. And more work needs to be done in that area. And so right now we're re-examining our processes and our policies to determine how we can reduce administrative and unnecessary bureaucratic barriers to participation. And it's not just limited to the contracting and consultant side. We're also focusing in on the workforce side. We want to see everybody participate in the workforce for construction related to transportation. So we have programs right now where we're partnering with the Chicago Urban League. That's a new program that started in 2013. That's providing crucial training to people in underserved areas to participate in our workforce by giving them the necessary skills that they would need to get into an apprenticeship program. And we're working on that program in conjunction with the unions for the first time, and the unions are guaranteeing at least a 25% placement rate of those graduates into a union apprenticeship program. I think that is a huge, huge step forward for the work that we're doing. We also have our Highway Construction Career Training Program, in which we partner with the Illinois Community College Board and community colleges across the state to provide much needed training to get people prepared to work in the workforce, not only on our highway projects, even though it's called the Highway Construction Career Training Program, but also on our transit projects and on the rail projects as well. In fact, we had graduates from that project work on, I think, the CTA Red Line project and also the Englewood Flyover project that Metra is doing right now down south to improve freight train and commuter train flows. We have a $10 an hour hiring incentive for contractors that use graduates from either one of those programs, and the Federal Highway Administration has given us permission to use it on federal aid highway projects as well. So we've expanded the coverage of that program. It's for apprenticeship hours or training hours on any contract that IDOT does. The governor directed us, as soon as we got that FHWA approval, to apply it to every project that it could be applied to. And so we are doing so and following that directive. And I think we're making a difference for a lot of people out there that are now having the opportunity not only to enter the workforce. We even had one woman who graduated. She got into the workforce and she was able to start her own DBE firm, and now she has been successfully competing as a DBE for some of our work. So it just shows the economic opportunity that it can bring to people that in the past might not have had that opportunity. I also want you to know that we are focusing on a more sustainable transportation system by introducing new technologies. In 2013, I challenged our staff to let at least one 100% recycled project. Well, they did 3. So we let 3 100% recycled projects, and 100% might be a little misleading. 97% of the materials that went into those resurfacing projects was recycled or reused. We had to use 3% virgin binder to keep all of that product together. So, based on the technology that we have available to us and based on the materials testing that our labs did and work we did with the Illinois Center for Transportation at the U of I, that is the most recycled right now that we can put into a project. And we got that done, and I got to give hats off to the staff for going above and beyond the challenge to get that done. We are also, for the first time ever, installing an alternate energy source for one of our rest areas. We're putting in a wind turbine in western Illinois at one of our welcome centers, and when that wind turbine goes in, it's going to be powering that rest area. We're also exploring the possibility of solar energy also powering some of our rest areas across the state. We recycle our aluminum signs and use recycled materials. You might have noticed those 70-mile-an-hour speed limit signs out there that have gone up. Well, all of that was recycled material. We did not use new aluminum for those signs. The other thing that we've done is we've created a sustainability report card because we want to score every single project that we do. We want to score the use of recycled materials, consideration of alternate transportation options. We're going to score emissions and greenhouse gas reduction and more. And I think that's really important that we establish that and we baseline that now, because it's going to be something that's going to be critical to making sure that we are making investments smartly into our transportation system. We also have a smart transportation project that we have put out on a bulletin, and I think now Jacobs Engineering is doing the work on for us in phase 1, and that's going to be on the Edens Expressway, and it's really based on some work that was done out in the state of Washington where you use active traffic management systems with active lane traffic management, and I think that also is going to have some significant impacts on congestion in the area, and then also to help us reduce those emissions from people just sitting in traffic. And if you haven't noticed lately, we have been experiencing a lot of ice and snow. I know, surprise. Part of what we do is to mobilize our operations forces to do battle with the snow and ice to ensure that Illinois can keep moving in extreme weather. And I got bad news for you today. It's snowing, surprise again, and the guy that kind of oversees all that is actually sitting in the audience. So I don't know how things are going out there, but hopefully we're getting that snow off the roads. We have over 3,300 full and part-time employees and seasonal employees that are dedicated to the task of removing ice and snow from our roadways, and we've got over 1,750 plows and other equipment to clear our roads during winter weather events. We also have helped with road closures and then debris removal during the extreme spring floods that we experienced in April of 2013 and the tornadoes in the late fall, which really hammered a diverse section of the state, from Washington, Illinois to Diamond, Illinois, down to Brookport. Those areas were all heavily damaged, and we are providing much needed debris removal and support to those areas. So our Minutemen, who are also in the Chicagoland area, are also working to assist motorists and to keep travelers as safe as possible on our expressways. In fact, during the storm Ion, the blizzard we had a couple weeks ago, they had over 2,000 assists in just 3 days. So they're helping also to keep motorists safe. And that brings me to a very important part of my discussion. And I know also that this is personally important to the governor, and that is the safety of the users of our transportation system. And I'm going to tell a personal story here, which I try not to do too often, but when I was 9 years old, my grandmother was killed in a car accident, and it had a very profound impact on our family. And I can tell you that the horror and the tragedy that results from a traffic fatality cannot be overstated. That awful event has been woven into the fabric of our family forever. And I want to make sure, in my position, that I can do everything I possibly can to keep that from happening to other people in Illinois. I think I want to work tirelessly, I know I want to work tirelessly to draw attention to the issue and to try and save some lives. And at the Department of Transportation, that's one of the things that we do, and we do very hard. I have to tell you, I've done events in 2013 that were emotionally wrenching. To kick off our seatbelt campaign last spring, I stood with a mother who lost her 16-year-old son in an accident because he forgot to buckle his seatbelt. He was on a gravel road just down the road from their house. He was driving down the gravel road, got off a little bit, 16, a new driver, not real experienced in how to handle things. He flipped the car. He made sure his girlfriend was buckled in. She walked away. He didn't. He got thrown from the car and was killed. And that poor woman, it was an emotional event because she went into great detail about all of that. I was also with a young woman in Springfield during the Illinois State Fair who was in a horrifying accident. I saw pictures of her car. There was nothing left of her car. She too had a roadway departure accident, which is a nice way to say the car leaves the roadway and rolls over. And she walked away because she had her seatbelt on, but she was obviously moved by that, and she feels committed to getting the message out to her peers in school that they should always wear a seatbelt. Over the past 5 years, 4,700 people have died in traffic crashes in Illinois. And while that is less than the over 6,250 people that died over the 5-year period prior to that, it is still an unacceptable number. In addition, crashes in 2012 resulted in 84,000 injuries. Now that's down from 94,000 injuries 5 years earlier, but still, it's unnecessary and tragic. The governor has signed into law legislation that is helping to reduce some of the causes of traffic crashes and related injuries and fatalities. Now, all vehicle occupants must wear seatbelts, and the use of handheld mobile devices is barred while driving. In November, before the handheld ban took effect, we did an observational survey of handheld device use and found that statewide, and listen carefully, 1 in 8 drivers, 12% of the people out there on the road that you're going to be on the road with, are using handheld devices while they're driving. And it's worse here in northeastern Illinois. It's 1 in 5 drivers were using a handheld device while driving. And listen, ladies, female drivers are 20% to 50% more likely than male drivers to be using the devices while behind the wheel. We will work with our law enforcement partners to drive the message home that this is illegal and could be fatal. If you walk away from this event today and can only remember one thing, I ask that you let it be that you should never drive distracted, that you should buckle up every trip, every time, every one, and be especially vigilant in work zones and school zones, and never drive impaired. Beyond legislation, IDOT uses the 4 E's to battle traffic fatalities and serious injuries: education, enforcement, engineering, and emergency services. We have formed an executive safety committee, which met earlier this week, and with our federal partners, the Secretary of State, the Illinois State Police, the Tollway, and our local governments, we are trying to come up with strategies to reduce the number of people dying on our roadways. We meet once a quarter to look at the statistics and take a risk-based approach to address the most recent leading causes of crashes. We met this week and have found that we have seen fatalities from crashes on city streets rise, along with increases from crashes involving motorcycles, pedestrians, pedicyclists, and large trucks. That does not mean that the large trucks or the motorcycles or the pedestrians are at fault. It means that they were involved. So we need to increase awareness of the motoring public that they need to be vigilant when they're behind the wheel. Many of our accidents and fatalities, not accidents, crashes, many involve impaired or distracted driving and/or speed. So please, again, do not do that. Our most vulnerable are our younger drivers, and so we are partnering with the Ford Foundation on Operation Teen Safe Driving and on our first Drive for Tomorrow program, which is a safety fair aimed at teen drivers. We taught over 1,400 high school students about safety awareness and practices, and the state police and local law enforcement were at our sides driving the point home. So I'd like to challenge you to consider the example you set when you drive, when you get behind the wheel and you have young people in your car. Help us to teach those young drivers to be responsible and courteous motorists. Your life, or the life of someone you love, could depend on it. And so with that, I'd like to go ahead and close and take any questions you might have. You know, the fun part of giving this speech is getting your questions. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to all of the exciting things that are happening in transportation and what we can do to improve the lives of people across our great state. Travel safe. Thank you.
You notice that our speaker is drinking but not driving.
That's right. I was going to bring my text up too.
Okay, we have a few questions, and any other questions, please pass them up, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. The first is from Peter Scosi. Peter, where are you? Right there, with the Metropolitan Planning Council. His question is, what is IDOT doing regarding commute options in the region?
And thank you, Peter. I'm glad you asked that question. And as I mentioned, we're working closely with PACE on the bus-on-shoulder option. We think it's important to continue to make those investments in transit in the region. I think transit is a very important part of commuting options. I also think that the work that CDOT has done with putting those divvy bike stations near transit facilities helps with that last mile connection. And I think making sure that we have options for that last mile connection are going to be critically important to increase transit ridership and transit use here in northeastern Illinois. Obviously, there is more work that we can do in working with the CTA and Metro as well to increase the level of service and to provide additional capacity and to look at hopefully someday service expansion. I know we have to focus on state of good repair right now, but I think that there is some opportunity out there as it relates to some of our major employment centers and trying to make sure that we can provide transit options in those areas as well. So those are areas we're committed to working on solution towards, and in the short run, I think the expansion of bus on shoulder is going to provide some significant benefits to the region.
Okay, thank you. This question is from Ben Brockschmidt, who's a member of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, not a member of the City Club, Jay, so we should really recruit him. Ben, where are you? Anybody who's a member of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce could certainly afford $50 membership. Here's your question. It's a City Club. What do you expect? With MAP 21 expiring and numerous federal rules not made, how does uncertain federal future of transportation impact IDOT?
Thank you, Ben. And Ben is a former legislative staffer, so he certainly understands the Washington scene probably better than I could ever dream of understanding it. But what we've done as we plan our program going forward, we're assuming for us MAP 21 level of funding, but lower ceilings, so accessing a much smaller amount of our apportionment. And with that, we believe that's a conservative approach. Of course, we're watching with interest what's happening in Washington, because I don't know, many of you don't know this or may know this. The Highway Trust Fund is very close to insolvency. I think the latest projections was for that to happen maybe even later this year. And if that were to be the case, then the Federal Highway Administration would have to start portioning back the amount of money that the states can seek reimbursement on. If that were to happen, that will obviously create some significant challenges for the work that we've got going on at the Department of Transportation. Fortunately, we budget very conservatively when it comes to our projects, and so I think in the short run we would be able to withstand that action, but I think if it became prolonged, then it would begin to create issues for us and would have an impact on the work that we could do going forward. So that's something we're watching very closely. We're very engaged with our congressional delegation. The governor has a person in Washington who watches these things very closely for us, who calls on us and engages us when necessary so that we can have our input into the process to make sure that we're not left in a situation where, and it doesn't just impact what happens on the highway side, it will also impact on the transit side, because a portion of the Highway Trust Fund is set aside for transit investments. While those don't flow directly through the Department of Transportation, it will impact what I told Peter and all of you about how we would like to see transit usage grow in the region, so that would also be impacted. So it's something we take very seriously and we're watching very closely, and I encourage all of you to also get involved in that process and make it known to our elected officials in Washington that this is just too important not to address this legislative session.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, Steve Schlickman, where are you, Steve? Great minds think alike. Schlickman and Ed Mazer just about have the same question here. Can you speak to the concerns about the safety of rail tanker cars carrying oil through the Chicago area? And I'll just add a little to that because he stole my line. Any plans to have them possibly circumvent certain populated areas?
That is under the purview of the Federal Rail Administration. I will tell you that I had a conversation yesterday with Joe Zabel about a number of issues, and this came up. It's something they're taking very seriously. The Illinois Department of Transportation has no oversight role in this arena, but I know it's something that they are taking very seriously at the Federal Railroad Administration in Washington. I anticipate that there's going to be some action related to that. Obviously, this is a big issue and has become an even bigger issue over the last few months. So it's something that we're hoping that our partners in Washington will address.
Thank you.